Pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Seeing none, I move we adopt the agenda.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Great. So we need to start by electing a chair and a vice chair for the budget committee. Would you like to nominate who would be somebody?
You know, I was thinking. 45 years ago, some guy urged me to run to the school board. I think it's time for payback, and I'll nominate Steve Schwisher to be chair.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, so just refresh my memory. So we vote on that,
Yes, we do.
and then we do the same thing for them.
No, yes,
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. Okay, all in favor of Steve Schwisher being the chair for the budget committee, say aye.
all right.
Aye. Sweet.
I think at this
Yeah.
point, you can actually hand the gavel to Steve
Great.
to do the next part.
Steve's got this down. so-
Too much practice.
Okay, at this point, we now have the nominations open for vice chair. We have a nomination for vice chair.
Nominate Rob Corrigan.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other nominations? Okay, all in favor of Rob Corrigan, say aye.
Aye.
You are now our vice chair.
I'm not sure what I did to Don 50 years ago.
Appears to be like an arrow.
So at this point, we're gonna move into the budget message.
So, we've been talking about some of the challenges in public session, the board meetings around PERS. We weren't trying to panic too much because of our funding sources, and student enrollment usually is a part of that. So I think what you're going to see in the final message is us trying to be conservative, but not too conservative. There are still some things we are unsure about. We did push projecting ahead. This is the first year we haven't grown. We don't anticipate. 1 year we don't think is a trend. We think it's an anomaly. So we're planning for some growth. So enrollment projection for next year is we're basing the budget off of 1170. We're about 1155, 1160 right now. We thought we'd have 1180 because last year we ended at 1185. So there's a reduction in students, impacts us because that's how we get paid. The $1.2 million in roll up on PERS, just PERS, not roll up, not then also our staff roll up costs. But those two indicators are also impacting. We are also saw trends that we needed to right size in the budgets for 3 years. We've overspent on operations, and that's when inflation hit 3 years ago and it didn't settle. And so those costs also coincides with the CAT tax. For those who are familiar with the CAT tax, that corporate tax that comes back to schools, we get charged more because most of our vendors are national vendors and they meet the requirement to pay. So we've seen those costs goes up as an organization. So we've added 100,000 there. Insurance is up almost 100,000. I think it's 80. So there's just some factors impacting the budget, which in a normal year might not be as challenging, but the fact that we've lost some kids this year make it challenging. I mean, 1.2 in PERS alone was challenging. We've really done a good job of being trying to be mindful in the fiscal management of the district. Again, I think if I reflected a decade ago, coming out of that economic really bad time in 2007 and the economy that was, I think we started, my first year, we had a $400,000, not even reserves, had carry forward. And now we've got 1.85 in reserve, so we're not dipping into that. I would say challenges with this budget projecting forward are, do we get 1,170 kids, right? If not, then we may be we are looking at a reduction of staffing this year because that's our number one driver. We've cut some costs in other places as well that we felt that are things we needed to do that we may have to put off. But also staffing because 85% of us is staffing, right? You can't have a financial challenge without it typically impacting staffing. So we're looking at that, and I think we didn't want to be uber conservative because that would mean a deeper cut in staffing. And if we get kids, then that would be kind of unfair to those folks. We feel we can make it through on the budget we proposed, and if we don't get the return on kids, and if some of the trends continue, we still may be looking at some reductions in the future as well. But right now, we feel very comfortable about where we are with this budget. Still seeing growth in the region, right? There's still a lot of positive factors in the region that we are optimistic about. There's some affordable housing that is supposed to start breaking ground. That always helps us. So we'll see where those impact and what we go through, but feel very comfortable with the budget we're presenting today. Questions of me?
Yeah, I have a brief follow-up. Does appear a little bleaker than in past years because of the PERS and a variety of issues, and you're trying to thread a tight needle. So in the staffing reductions, are you looking at just not filling vacancies, or are you looking at an actual reduction in force, or what are you thinking there?
I'm not sure that vacancies will hit it all. So we're working right now with the association to talk about, if that's going to equate to reduction in force. It's about, do the openings, can we not fill them and meet the needs, right? And typically those things don't line up perfectly because you still need that teacher, even though that is open, and then it causes a reduction somewhere else. So we're still working through those, but yeah, we're anticipating we'll absorb some, and we may have to notify some folks of reduction. We're still, again, playing through licensures, looking at that process.
Then you like 20 more kids will show up.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. It is a challenge. And I will say, again, I think we feel comfortable. We know there's uncertainty in the federal budget. Federal budget is usually about 405,000 for us out of, roughly 23 million overall. So it's not a big percentage, but it's still 405,000, right? Still, and it usually means people, because that's especially, for example, Title I, we employ people to help serve kids through Title I. So it's really, there's still some challenges there, but we think we've got a budget that gives us that wiggle room to not have to be reactionary and get through this year. And, again, like a lot of districts, if this anomaly turns into a trend, then we'll be looking at another conversation next year that's not as positive.
Other questions for Kurt?
It's sort of in the news all the time about uncertainty coming with federal funds. What are the assumptions that you baked in terms of one or other?
I think, did we bake it? Did we put in the 25% reduction?
We did.
Yeah.
We did.
So we think there may be a 20, what we're hearing is it's either going to stay pat, no improvement, or a 20 to 25% reduction. So we think one of the things that we also did is upon conversation with the board, or I think we did, is we used to have, of all of our contingency, we had it, some of it was in a pot that you actually couldn't touch, and some you could with board discretion. So upon discussion with the board last year, Sherry has moved all of that into the area where the board has discretion, and if they wanted to tap into it, they could. So It's still in a contingency, only spent with with discretion of the board. But we wanted to make sure we had all those funds available if we needed to. Again, we don't, it's really hard when people are involved to be so conservative in an area where you don't know when it's someone's job. I mean, it's tough enough with what we're looking at now. And if we added on that reduction, we'd be going deeper. And so again, we tried to be kind of middle of the ground conservative, but not too reactionary, and not to a place where we couldn't respond within the constraints of the budget.
That's two quick follow-ons.
Yeah,
One
yeah.
is, are you getting any direction on that point from ODE, or is there any cohesion between Central Oregon districts or any? That we're all doing the same thing roughly?
Most people are, it's a hurry up and wait game,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the roller coaster, it's much like what you're seeing in other things that are going out, right? It's every other day there's a conflicting message, it's something else. So we're not, it's gonna be flow through, but it's not, if you're not doing it, you know, we don't know how the state's response to the DEI letter from the federal government is gonna impact, right? Evidently, the feds are taking on Maine completely now over a whole another topic, right? I mean, so most folks, the message seems to be that federal funds are gonna come through to the state and to be stressed that way, and even the direction of the federal Department of Education may not have as much of an impact on the funding source. They may still reduce the funding, but it'll be more of a flow through the state is what some of the things we're hearing. Unless they don't like you, and then they may freeze all your funding. So we'll see.
So it's a normal year.
Yes.
Well, there's a lot of sources of uncertainty, I know, but can you give me a sense of what the rough order of magnitude is for that 25%? We're probably less exposed.
Yeah, so all of our federal funds total of 405,000. So if we're talking 20% of that, you're talking 80. I mean, in 23 million, right? I mean, it still hurts, but we, again, Sherry and I think we've got a budget that gives us some room to move. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, please.
I was just gonna say, the other thing, and it's kind of what I've heard from other districts, you know, they're making a plan for if it happens. And like Kurt said, we have our contingency in that, but we also have a staffing reserve that we've been building over the last few years. Unfortunately, haven't had to touch, but that is part of our emergency plan too, if needed, so.
I guess my follow-up question is, I don't see that line item. Does that cover a 20% reduction?
The staffing reserve?
Yes.
Yeah, I believe there's 350,000 in
Okay.
there. And it's a separate special revenue fund.
So we have kept that because every year we've grown. This year we hired a teacher to start the year, and every year period, we have to hire some staff to meet the requirements of an IEP or a 504 plan that requires some staffing levels or requirements with kids that have moved in. So we've just made it pretty much a stationary part of the budget based on those things.
And we are projecting in this budget, we are projecting not a decrease nor an increase from the federal government.
That's right.
Okay,
Yep. We're flatlining.
okay, and so without an increase projection, are we projected to dip into those reserve funds?
Well, if we stay the same, we're fine.
Okay,
If we don't, then we'll have to pay for some of the staffing out of other line items.
okay.
Yeah. Yep.
Any other questions? At that point, let's turn to Sherry for the document reading.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Amy. She's put in a lot of work to make this beautiful document that we have. It's so much easier to read, and I appreciate that, and I hope you guys enjoy it too. She really did a lot of work to get that. The document itself is pretty much self-explanatory on page 2, which is table of contents. It tells you all the sections of it. And that we have the tabs in there to help you find things. I don't know how much you want me to actually go over the document itself and the layout of it or not. I think everybody's pretty
My perspective,
capable of,
if there's any major changes, make sure to let us know. Otherwise,
Yeah,
just
no,
the general-
no major changes in the document itself, other than it looks a lot better and is easier to read.
Well, I do notice the continuous page numbers again, and that's really helpful.
Yes.
Thank you.
And you can see them, they're larger and the font's larger.
Rob, I'm sure, yeah, just save the time thumbing around looking for it. Could you tell us, I think you mentioned that the reserve funds that require and don't require board approval and the staffing reserve are listed somewhere in the
So the
special reserve.
The reserve, the contingency and the reserve for the general fund are, I'll tell you what page it's on.
That's one of my feelings.
Page 48. The very bottom of the page,
You say that.
48. And the contingency, we did not put the full amount in. I don't know that I didn't tell Kurt that, but I held back 400,000. Just to have a little cushion, but we put the majority of it in contingency, which with board approval, we can spend if needed. The 400,000. We can't, I mean, I'm happy to move that. So we can, but I like to have that little push there, so. And then the staffing reserve is a special revenue fund and it is reported. The expenditure portion of it. On. I'll tell you in just a minute, I really will. Page 78. 78 is the expenditure, and the revenue is reported on. Page 61.
It does require board approval.
The 400 we cannot spend.
Okay.
The
Regardless.
1,440,000 requires board approval.
There was conversation in a previous board meeting, actually it might have been David, who's no longer with us, who said, well, why don't we have all of it into the one account? Because it's not really contingency, you can't spend it. Again, I'm not sure that we ever want to spend down to zero anyway, even 400 would be challenging, but his point was it would all take board approval. You never know if you had catastrophic failure of something and you needed to fix it. That could be the difference. So,
Sure.
so I think it's a good conversation to have whether the board feels the board can, this is the time to make that. Once we
Right,
lock into it for the year, it stays that way.
So
Once
what
the-
is that, what allows those funds to be spent at 400,000? What?
You can't
You
spend them.
can't spend the
It's
40.
just sits there for.
It's kind of it's meant to be a cushion to help you get through the summer months when you don't have any income coming in.
Right,
Which is what
but if you can't spend it, well, how does it help you?
We could start spending it July 1st of the following year.
Oh, I see.
So we would have that
Side
cushion.
amount it's saved for the following.
Yeah, to help us get through our summer payrolls
And
and
if I remember correctly, there's some sort of requirement to have a contingency fund.
Well, the recommendation for districts our size is between 8 and 11%, which we're right at the bottom of that threshold with where we are.
with
and that's a
both
combination.
Yeah, with the combination. Yeah. So bigger districts, because you're talking like a Salem Kaiser where it's, a lot more money. They're more like 3 to 5% is what their recommendation is. So it just depends on the size of the district, because replacing a roof costs the same, whether you have, you know, a $500 million budget or a $20 million budget. So, and again, that's completely a board decision. I would not believe, I think we structured our budget well enough that we have some room to respond to, more conservative, reality. So I'm not anticipating, the real issue would be, we got 3 buildings that are in pretty good shape. It's if we had some kind of issue, really, that would be a factor. So I'm comfortable with it the way it is, but I know that there was a conversation with the board at one point about putting into one account.
Well,
So-
yeah,
I do wanna,
I don't, I just, what,
I do wanna commend Kurt over your time there, that contingency and, you know, your reserves have grown tremendously. And just to give a little historical context, as I arrived in the district, discovered that the previous year they'd overspent by $50,000 out of whack there. So we started with -50 and we should say, so.
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's a real, and over the time, it's been really hard to build that.
Yeah.
But you've done a great job of getting it to where it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the good thing in the last decade, we've fairly minus COVID anomaly with attendance, but you know, we've grown modestly over the last 6 years, and been able to make that a priority, and still added staff in both classified and certified. So, you know, we're in a good position, I should say, compared to a lot of the folks. Really, the biggest hit for us this year is we would weather the storm of enrollment if it weren't for a doubling of our PERS rates. I mean, that's a massive factor for us. I think the estimate is $1.2 million with current staffing levels. So that's with no new folks. It actually might even be with projecting with a slight reduction. So it's that one is a big hit. And so you know, I think again, I feel fortunate. It's never, it's always kind of the last resort, but we're honestly kind of thankful we're in a position to absorb it as well as we are.
Do they don't tier that in like a certain amount? So it's like, it's not, because California, they tiered it in.
Yeah,
It is.
so we're closing in on debt service, so it's gonna be 11% this biennium, so doubles this year. We were at 11, it's now at 22, and then next biennium, we're gonna jump to 29.
Okay, so there is 11.
And then we'll be at full rate. That will put us at full rate, and our bond against PERS expires halfway through the next biennium. So our second year debt service is about half. So we'll see some savings in the second half of the next biennium on the debt service, but our rates are going up again.
Kurt, with board approval, could the district use the lumber and mill fund for other purposes besides capital improvement?
Well, I got a proposal for that at some point for the board, which, you know, if the board continues to move forward with this, we did a staff tour of the Coalfield Center to look at what we need to make that work and function with private office spaces. So my recommendation would be the board would approve those funds to use to kind of stakehold the transition so we could make a more timely move to that facility. So conversation still to be had. We have a work session after this. That'll be you know, more information for the board on district assets and where we're forward planning. No decisions, obviously, because we can't, but good discussion to think about for the May meeting. And I think with that, Don, it really, if I remember from when I started with you, it's really about capital projects. So I don't believe that money's allowed to be just in the way it was taken in. There's never been any allowance that would be operational. It would be capital improvements. I mean, operational, I mean, staffing, it would be capital improvements to the district.
Okay, back to Sherry.
Sorry, Sherry.
That's okay.
Great question.
Kurt kind of hit the highlights of the budget. We did build the budget on the governor's recommended $11.36 billion allocation. With the 49-51 split, meaning 49 is allocated this year, 51 next year in the biennium. And we based our ADM on 1170. Well, I think we're gonna be okay there. I think so.
Yeah, we don't have trend, like we have 7 years of growth in this 1 year of an anomaly, so
Yeah.
we're hoping that it is an anomaly, and if not, I mean, we'll again be making a correction next year in the cycle.
The only other things I kind of want to touch base on that Kurt hasn't already hit on is this budget. We took all the software costs, which are up, and put them into the technology department just for easier tracking for our purposes. It dawned on me as I was looking at this that I didn't let the history follow that. And I don't think I can change the history in the document, but I can get some history as far as, so you can see what prior year was total instead of spread throughout the document. But this year, for current year, it is all in the technology department. All software will be paid out of technology.
Yep.
The other thing Kurt kind of hit base on is our insurance costs. They're up 20% this year. The budget looks like it's more than that because we didn't budget enough last year to cover the costs this year. They were up significantly. The new school, we have a new insurance agent and we had some updated valuations that needed to be done. So our current liability insurance costs were up and they will be up 20% next year.
Good question. Liability, does that insurance also cover the new SPRD community center? Do we carry that insurance?
They still are on our property.
Okay.
It's still ours, we're leasing.
Okay.
Yeah, we still are the owners of that, so. Other than that, those are the only two things that really come to mind that might jump out and.
Well, there is a third actually, and I'm not sure how it grew in the last couple of years, but, and I thought maybe you were gonna cover it, so I didn't get into it as much, but, as much as state legislation says there's no cost to the district, PERS reform in many ways is impacting us. And one of those is, tier 3 folks. Well, two things, paid leave Oregon and tier 3 employees. So there's no benefit for saving sick leave anymore. And so we've seen our sub budget from 2 years ago be $220,000 to next year we're projecting $320,000. So it is, people are using their leave. It's their right, it's their leave, but because there's no benefit to saving it for many of our employees, we're seeing it being used at a higher rate than we have in the past. So so that's another cost driver that is just that we have to absorb in the process. So I know that's another big one if we're looking at items, at least in the trends of our bigger expenses and where they're going. So.
Sorry, I'm just looking at this. What are copier leases at $70,000?
We lease all the copiers in throughout the district.
It's $70,000 a year.
And I can tell you it's much less expensive than buying them and trying to maintain them yourself.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
can probably.
Yeah,
That is crazy.
it is.
Yeah.
I know.
Wow.
It's an animal.
While we were talking, I thought about something else I probably should bring to your attention, and it's in another reserve account. It's in our bus reserve account, which is Fund 295. And there's a revenue side and an expenditure side. The expenditures are on page 78. And there's a huge line item in there. For bus and capital improvements at $850,000 expenditure. And there's a revenue also that offsets that, and that is only a requirement of our Gatsby audit. It's an audit requirement for Gatsby 87 or 86, one of those two. So it looks weird in there. It stands out like a sore thumb, but it's just to offset revenue and expenditure. We have to have it budgeted in order to make sure the appropriations there when we submit to ODE, they don't dock us for not having the appropriation.
But they offset it, yeah.
They do offset. The other thing that you might notice a little bit of a decrease in our unemployment budget, the amount budgeted this year. Last year, we went a little bit high because of the new allowance for classified employees to file for unemployment. We really did not have many people, you know. So I lowered it a bit this year to help out budget the balance the budget.
Which is another concern, again, where we feel we have some wiggle room because it is a benefit people have the right to if they choose to take it, right? We can't really do anything about it. It's the law. So it is, it is something that we were mindful about, but it's one of those spaces that, again, we felt we could move on. And we hope our folks don't surprise us. And we see an uptick in unemployment costs, but for us, it's been less impactful than other districts.
Do you have any speculation why there's less filing? I mean, I'm sure they're aware of what you're doing. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we've tried to communicate that we're self-insured for unemployment, so it's a dollar for dollar cost and the impact on the district. We've also kind of, and we haven't really had to execute it, but figured if we started getting a big uptick, then we'd try to provide a more robust summer school and just pay people for being here over the summer rather than doing that. And then quite honestly, I think summer people have a conscience and they're not willing to be on vacation and file for unemployment, right? They know that they signed up for a job that they work during the school year. They work a certain set amount of days and they don't feel comfortable. So I think it's a combination of all those factors that's helped us. And we have a pretty good relationship with most of our employees. So I think it's I mean, we meet monthly with both the unions. We try to have positive problem solving in the way. So I think it's a combination of those things. That being said, there's a whole, people could say, nope, I'm gonna file and we'll have to make some adjustments.
Just for clarification, yeah, what that unemployment fund is for covering costs over, or payroll costs over the summer break. Right? Did I get that correct?
It's
Any-
all
any,
unemployment.
Yeah, all unemployment, because we are self-insured, so it,
So for example, I think the new unemployment law is that you can file after a week. So technically our 2 week spring break, some folks could file for a
I
week
see.
of unemployment.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
There is legislation right now. If you guys, you can decide what you want to do, but there's legislation right now that after 2 weeks, teachers who are on strike could file for unemployment.
Right. Okay.
Right? And so, and we would have to cover that. At least in that legislation, that would come off any kind of settlement or wage settlement that happened with staff, but that's a accounting nightmare.
Yeah.
And I don't think, again, I don't know that's going to impact us. We tend to have a positive relationship, but there's some things that have big impacts that are going on as far as the labor stuff in the state that we're still mitigating. I think one district said last year they paid $1.2 million in unemployment, that bigger district, but because people have the right to file.
Okay.
So.
I think we're pretty fortunate.
Yeah.
Sherry, Kurt, anything else?
I don't have anything else.
Questions?
Other than, I don't know if Amy's talked to, but we need to get new pictures of the budget committee. Because if you look at this, they're all blank.
I'll just ask, and not to be weird about the copier leases, but I'm looking at it and it says the actual in 23 was 0 and in 24 was 0, which changed that whole technology budget. I mean, it went up.
This is it's another lease thing with,
Yeah, just curious how it works, because it changed that whole section by over $70,000.
Well, it may have been, Sherry talked, it may have been by building, it may have been in a building expenditure. I mean, Sherry's I can't speak specifically, but I know that at one point, each building got a supply budget in their office, and sometimes it was coming out of that versus a district tech fund. So I think it's part of the centralization. Again, Sherry may correct me, but I believe that's it.
The actual lease costs are coming directly from each building. That $70,000 is another Gatsby 87 line item where there is an offset in the revenue
Okay. Yeah.
to. And it may not be needed this year, but if we don't have it appropriated,
Right,
And
I
since it-
understand. I just was trying to figure out,
yeah.
you know, because it doesn't show it happening here, but it makes sense that it came out of the building. That's why I was asking.
Well,
I-
or I guess, again, I was taking it as our centralization, but if Sherry's saying that the building costs are still paying for it, and this is just a Gatsby requirement, that also might be, just so when we have them here to do the audit, they give us a clean bill of health for, I guess, double entry and stuff.
And that's why there's the $70,000 expenditure and revenue. They actually give us, and they didn't give us one last year, so I'm thinking maybe it was only in the first year of this Gatsby 87. They give us an entry, an adjusting entry to record. But I want to be prepared for it because we didn't have it appropriated the first year, and ODE does not like that.
Rob, I don't know if this is for you, Sherry or Kurt, but just, I'll see the numbers, but I'm curious if you can comment on the relative magnitude of step and column increases this year over last year as opposed to prior years, given the changing demographics and the consolidation you did in the tables last.
So again, we took a conservative number. We don't know. We just got the demand to bargain last week. So we are bargaining with both groups. So again, why we have some flexibility in the budget is because we don't know the answer to that until we finish and finalize bargaining.
Are you?
I mean, we put in what we think, right? Again, trying to be in the ballpark of what we think COLA and cap and what that looks like. But until we finalize, we don't know. And I mean, honestly, if we end up settling above that, we might have to make other adjustments. Whether it's not staffing or wherever, right? If we settle below that, we will be in obviously better shape. But well, I think we're gonna learn a lot along the way of, we have to have this approved by June. And sometimes state budget isn't finalized until the end of June, and federal funds, we're not sure when that's gonna come through. So in some of them, we've taken our best analysis of what we see going on and kind of put that placeholder in there, but there still may change.
I guess what I was really meaning to get at.
Yeah.
Was more just the demographics of our employee staff.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if it were even flat next year, you know, the people that are at the younger end move up and the
Yep.
people that are
Yep.
topped out don't. I'm kind of curious in a macro sense, how
Yeah.
you would compare what we expect for that, you know, cause to compare to prior years.
Well, it'd be different. I think the last contract we came off was 5.5 and 4.5. I think those would be challenging numbers if we hit those again. So that was quite a big COLA. And it was right at the time because of the inflationary trends and where we were in the economy. So again, not to, you know, it really depends on where we land in those things. We think that we have accounted for that unless we've misjudged where we think we're gonna settle, right? We have to pick a mark. And I'm not trying to dance around it, but it's hard to sit in a budget meeting and say, oh, we planned for this COLA when we have folks in the bargaining unit there, right? I mean,
Yeah, I didn't mean to put
yeah.
on the spot, and I'm not even asking about COLA.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the demographics of the.
yeah, it's all
people.
part, it's all part of our roll-up. It is all a part of that. Who's leaving us, who's coming in. When we have openings, we put the budget as an average, not as a beginner and not as, and so it also depends on where we hire in the hiring process, where they fall. So there is still some room in those numbers. It's not a big hiring year. I can tell you that we have some openings that we feel we have to fill compared to what's happening in the dialogue. So I don't see a lot changing there from what we don't already know.
Just to add to that a little bit, you have some employees at the top of the scale and they have no room to move.
Yep.
At that moment, so I think maybe.
That is what I'm
We
getting at,
have
and I don't-
the majority of our employees probably are at the top of the scale. Would you?
Well, we have, well, I think we talked about it to the far right, we have like 25 folks at the far right bottomed out, but we have 70.
That's true.
I mean, it's about,
certified.
yeah,
too.
so, I mean, it depends on where we're talking, right? And again, to go back to the previous contract, we did some right sizing because of the challenge to Living Sisters. So the last contract's hard to, it's hard to compare that trend to this one because we collapsed 3 columns. We made our starting from
That's
38
what I'm
to
getting at.
45, right? So we won't see as big of a jump because of those adjustments we made to help support people who can't, well, I don't know if they can still afford to live in Sisters, but we made an effort to try to make it where they could afford to live in Central Oregon. And until we get into bargaining, I don't know that I'm not sure we'll see that kind of adjustments this year. But who knows where we're gonna end up with the COLA and cap, right? And we have accounted for the people we know about in their move up and whether they're moving up and what that looks like.
And you said it's not a big hiring year compared to recent.
Yeah,
Difficult problem I think you're also facing is the fact that you do have to do layoffs. That would probably come from the bottom of your salaries.
yeah, typically it's the least senior. I mean, I mean, there's protocol set in by, you know, licensure, recency, but there's some other things in the state statute, but yeah, it's not your top of the pay scale, folks.
Okay, other questions for Sherry? I mean, Sherry, is there anything else you wish to say?
No. I mean, I did, in the little book, there are some things that I put in there, things to know that are just I kind of looked at questions that have come up in the past that are pretty generalized and tried to answer them in there. So
That's also the acronym.
the
book, right?
acronyms
Yeah.
too at the back, chart of account explanation, and
This has been really helpful. That's great.
Good questions.
Okay, so at this point, unless we have more questions for the Sherry, then we're gonna talk amongst ourselves about the process coming up here, just the procedures. So, yeah, that's all the questions. Okay, let's move on to the process as a committee working, budget committee. In the past, you formulated questions in your own mind, have you gone through the document and everything? Then you forward them, unfortunately, to the chair, who then attempts to just compile them and then look for duplicates and that kind of thing, and sort them out that way. And then ship them back, then collectively, that's come from all of us, to Kurt and Sherry, and basically it's and since I've been doing it, it's been anonymous questions, so it didn't come from individual people, and sometimes more than one person may have had the same question, so it's just the list of questions. Then Kurt, Sherry, and other staff may choose, jump in and basically supply those answers, which come back to us at that point. So I just described how I think we've been doing it. And please add to that perception. But my question to all of you is, do you want to use that same process, or are there other ways you would like to go about it?
I thought that was effective.
I appreciate that
Yeah.
process. That's a lot.
It seemed to work well.
I have a suggestion though, or maybe a request, if, when the questions come in, to, if you could put the page number of the budget, if it's specific to a page. That's helpful because it also helps eliminate double questions. I mean, if you can,
That would be helpful. Last year when there weren't any, I
Yeah.
attempted to take a look at finding where in the document they were, and I couldn't find all of them.
that probably took you forever.
So some came across without.
Yeah, Yeah, that's,
And there's some general questions that come about that may not be associated. directly
Right.
to the document,
Mhm.
more about collective bargaining or this or that, or what have you, that's going on. But again, I guess I would say if we're gonna use the same process, when you're shifting your questions to me, if you put the page number, if you have a page number, that's really helpful to me at least. Compiling it.
So should we send the questions to you, Steve, or to Sherry?
They go to me.
Go to you.
Jeff, you have a question?
No.
Okay. Yeah, they go to me and we all now have this email address that was put together a year ago. And through the district, so you don't have to have your personal computer tied up with that. And at this moment, that list of emails, basically, I think is all handled through the district at this moment, right, Todd? So again, I assume it's gonna be the same set of emails, names and everything. So you use that process. So as you get your questions, you just simply send them to the, it says budget chair in there.
Yep.
So when they come to me. And so just send those emails to your district, to the budget chair, and then from there, I'll turn that around, and let's talk about timing of this. Because our next budget committee meeting is May the 7th. This is the 16th of April. So in order to turn this around, I'm thinking we need to have your questions to me by perhaps next Tuesday at latest. And that would be what, February 22nd? Or April, excuse me. It's April. And so then give me a couple of days to turn around and be to you by Thursday. Is that enough time? Very good.
yeah, Thursday, Friday. it's
Okay.
fine.
So if we target next Tuesday to have them at least emailed to my account, then I'll work hard to get it turned out in 2 days to get it back to these guys. Questions on that process?
So, and sorry, then the responses from Sherry then would be coming at
I'll-
the
I will-
following meeting,
I
or?
think we've emailed them back prior to the following
Yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
so you have time to review them and.
But then we also put them on the record so that they become a public document.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And they come back rather quickly, actually, I've been amazed how you guys have been able to turn that one out in questions, so. Even in 2 days after you come in, you got it to look at before the meeting.
So that would be the 24th. And then the meeting is until May 7th.
I won't have them back to you by the 20th. I'm actually gonna be on vacation next week. So I won't be back until the 26th and I'll work on them that week. I'll have them back to the 30th or the first.
So
30th
we
is
wouldn't
the
need
first.
them, so they could have more time to
They could.
collate.
Yeah.
If we could, I could release a couple of days.
Sure.
On the, in a
I don't know how long Steve needs, because that's a process to gather all those and that. If I have them 3 to 4 days before, well, I want to get them to you. It'll take me about 2 to 3 days to go through and answer and make sure Kurt and I.
But if we got them on the 28th,
Sure.
I mean, is that what we were, when were you thinking to send them to us? You were thinking the
28th
24th.
is a Wednesday, right?
Then sent to me by next Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I would take a couple of days to turn that around and get it to you guys.
I don't have my calendar.
Which would be,
Yeah, it would be the 24th would be a Thursday. I mean, I think if,
move that back a couple days to the 24th. We're to Sherry on the 26th.
Well, it'd be the
That would work
28th,
for me.
right? 28th is Monday morning.
This is the 27th, Monday morning.
Yeah.
No,
That's Sunday.
so 28th would be Monday morning. If they came in Monday morning,
Oh, yeah.
and then
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure close to the 30th or 1st, we can get them back, which gives a week until the hearing.
So at that point, then you guys would need to get them to me until at least, Thursday.
Yeah, I think that'd be a 4-day turnaround.
24, thank you, Steve.
If
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
that works, if that works for you, Steve, that works for me.
Hey, any other questions or comments about processing?
Just, this is my first rodeo.
Yes.
What sort of questions are we looking to be, what sort of things are we looking for and ask questions about?
Well, as you go through your document, there's gonna be things that come up that I see all the time. I sort of think I know what I'm doing, but it doesn't. What's that one item about? Or, you know, last year it looked much different and how come, and, you know, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. And there may be just a big overview kind of question, you know, why is all this stuff in this particular section as opposed to somewhere else, or, so those are the kinds of questions that come about. And you may even have questions that you want to at least have Sherry respond to. So what are the state trends? What are other districts doing at this moment? Or what are you hearing? Is that stuff really gonna go there? You know, where are we at on collective bargaining? So, I mean, all of those questions surface during this. So,
Perfect, thank you.
okay, any other comments, questions, thoughts on that? Well, I think we're set for that process. And when we take a look at our next meeting, that will be May 7th at the for the regular board meeting at that point. Now we have a consent agenda to go to, and that consists of the minutes from last year's budget committee. So there's one person that was not here then, but there was some blame on that vote. And other than that, we all were here, so that moment, I'm looking at the consent agenda, which has budget committee meetings from those two meetings. So now is the time to raise any questions, comments about those, or again, corrections you might want to make. So I'm looking for a motion to accept the consent. And
I just-
question.
Sorry, I noticed that it said that the April 17th was already moved and accepted. Did I miss that? And line 22 and 23. That me, May's a second, maybe it's out the first.
Oh, this is last year's.
That's last year.
Oh, okay,
That's last, over the minutes from last year.
adopting that's
Right.
the itself.
Right.
I move we adopt the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
Yeah, I don't remember the timeline. I understand what you're saying.
It's just, it was adopted the same day as the meeting. That's
But we might have.
Oh,
had
I
a prior
gotcha.
meeting. Now I can't remember the timeline, but I hear what you're saying.
Yep.
I'm trying to remember myself.
Which, on the May 1st meeting, there is, on line 21, it does say they amended it to the adoption to approved.
I just noticed that
That-
both those seem to suggest that.
It was
board
approved.
Yeah, we don't
adopted
want
I
that.
saw that too.
minutes the same day the meeting was held. But
Okay, so what line are you looking at? At which,
I saw
if
this.
I look at page 1 of 2 on the April 17, 2024,
Mhm.
on line 22, it says.
Jeff moved.
Asa seconded,
Oh,
the
to-
committee adopt
the agenda.
agenda.
just the agenda.
Just the
Thank
agenda.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
You're tough on it.
Like, oh no, we missed that.
Sorry.
That's-
We did that too.
So it should be more time to process.
It's all good.
Well, it's good
Just shoot at the hip.
I move that
Okay.
we,
Jeff,
It says that the motion passed 5-0.
to adopt the consent agenda, to adopt the what are you looking at?
The agenda,
Yeah,
Just the agenda.
right,
that would have been you before we passed it over to the
Oh.
budget hearing. That would have been the board,
okay.
just like what we did earlier.
Not all the board, not the committee members can't run an agenda because you haven't.
Right,
Handed it over yet.
right, that's the first
Okay,
thing.
there we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you, Jeff.
It's confusing.
and a second to adopt to approve our consent agenda. Any other comments or questions on that?
What was the second? Who seconded? I didn't hear the
We
second.
haven't even made it that far.
Oh, I think
With
that Dawn-
that, we had a second.
Don moved.
Don
Don
approved.
moved.
I'd like to second.
There we go.
Terrific. And we have a plan, right? Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
All right.
So we have that taken care of. All right, our announcements, May 7th is the budget meeting at 5 o'clock, followed by the regular board meeting. And with that, we will recess the budget committee until May the 7th at 5 o'clock. We'll recess. Right.
Thank you.
Thanks.